But I had an interesting one that I texted the other day, and your answer probably provoked me to think even more than it could have anyway. So someone had asked
That's what I try to do anyway, man. I hope you've seen that by now. I'm probably not going to give you a yes or no.
I
want you to have to wrestle with it to say, man, let's think about that. How does this work? How does this work?
Yeah. So I'd asked you a version of, is this saying the Lord's name in vain? It's funny. I said, is "Oh my Lord" saying Lord's name in vain? I correct myself in that text. I almost said, is saying "Oh my Lord" taking the Lord's, and then I changed. I was like, well, that pretty much answers itself. So I changed it to God just so you could answer it. But it was somewhat rhetorical, I guess. And we don't think about that very much, but you said it's more about the heart behind it. Like,
I think there's some of that.
You said sort of as a comparison or analogy there it's like shoot or dang. Is that the same thing as cursing? It's more the heart behind it. And that kind of got me thinking a lot about the words we use, and certainly the words we use matter to God.
That's it.
And I want to get to that, but the heart behind it is more important to him. And I guess I'd maybe start this by asking this question: If and I understand neither are perfect or ideal, but if I say something to someone that is encouraging, uplifting, building them up, doing something to spread a godly message to them, but I use a word that may be in the middle of that slipped in that I didn't mean to, whatever it may have been.
Right.
Or I put together the most perfectly structured, great sounding sentence in the world that cuts somebody down and tells them that they're no good.
Right.
Which of those two is more pleasing to God?
Well, I would definitely say it's not the latter.
Right.
Because the thing of it is, and that's the real answer, and what I think you must have done some work on it. Because what I was wanting you to see on Sunday night is to dig deep and look at, okay, number one is when we talk about taking the Lord's name in vain, that's from Exodus, is the first time we see it in Exodus 20. And what it means is to use it in an irreverent way, a disrespectful way, a way that's not meant to be used. I mean, the name of God was so holy to the Jews that they wouldn't even say the name Yahweh. They would say something else. I mean, they just could not say it because, no, that's a name you don't say. And I think to some degree we kind of changed that a little bit, where we might say OMG, or we might say, hey, look, I've led devotions on a Wednesday night and said, well, my Lord, or good gracious, or good golly, and I think the thing of it is, I don't think that falls under that purview of. Okay, it's not taking it in an irreverent or a disrespectful way, but I think I'm going to come at it at a different angle, and you just hit on it. My speech, Ephesians 4:29, Colossians 3, is our speech is supposed to be uplifting, and our speech is supposed to be encouraging. And so I'm going to look at it almost as, and I think if you go way, way back, we had a conversation about, all right, am I pulling someone towards Christ, or am I pushing someone away from Christ? Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that all my language, all my actions, everything I do is hopefully pulling someone towards Christ. So let's take it from there. If my speech is supposed to be uplifting, encouraging, okay, does that match? And I think it's one of, we always need to watch our language to make sure, okay, because if Jesus told us, he said, you're going to give account for every idle word, that's scary as it can be, because, man, I can't think of all the idle words I've said, and I got to give an account for every one of them. That's scary. So I want to make sure that we use our words wisely, and we make sure that everything we say is, Paul says, seasoned with salt. Mm-hmm. But I think take it another way of saying is, hey, it needs to be uplifting and encouraging. Is that uplifting and encouraging? I think that's where I'm going to be more towards, okay, rather than, okay, can I get by with saying X versus, okay, is my speech, is that actually encouraging to someone?
Yeah, and I think that,
and maybe that's what I meant by the heart behind it, the intent, and wanting to, what is the purpose of your speech?
Yeah, and I think that when with your answer, it's like, I think that's worth 5 minutes a show, and then you said something else, and I was like, now we might be at 15 minutes. Because it's like, because
what I said was, I'd rather you say shoot, right, or I'd rather you say, oh, dadgum, or my Lord, rather than
something else. Right, there's right. Like that. So that's where we kind of got to, like, are there degrees of different, and that's where you said, you're still working through that, maybe trying to figure, are there different degrees of, this word's worse than that one?
And I think therein lies the intent of that first definition, if it's taking God's name in a irreverent, disrespectful way, that's most definitely.
Worse. Now we're probably getting closer to blasphemous or
that, or maybe we're starting to split hairs. Mm-hmm. And again, strain at a gnat, swallow a camel. I don't want to get too much into splitting hairs, or what's the definition? Is
mm-hmm.
I don't, I'm not playing 90s politics. Yeah. I want to play. I mean, hey, I want to come at it from, okay, yes, there is always that disrespect and irreverence, but also let's look at it from the flip side of, is my speech edifying? Is it becoming of a child of God?
And I think that's maybe where I kind of give my disclaimer at the beginning of this, because people won't think I'm a hypocrite for what I'm about to say. I am 100% guilty of what I'm about to say, mm-hmm. like the worst at it. So it's just something I'm working on. But I think just in general, when I think about, okay, Reese asked me the other day, if I were in a movie and they told me to say this line, would it be okay if I said it? I said, yeah. I would ask you not to. And
she comes up with
she does. She has some great questions. And I said, well, you could. I mean, it'd be up to you, I guess. But at the end of the day, like, I think you should be able to figure out a way to say that, because that doesn't really add any substance whatsoever to the sentence.
Right.
And then I really started thinking about that probably more after I said that to her. If you take all these, this is probably the third episode that we've brought up language, profanity, swearing, different things. And my takeaway has been kind of this. I would almost challenge you to see if you can come up with a swear word, a cuss word, God's name in vain, any one of these things that give me a sentence that it's absolutely pertinent and required for it to be there. It's almost never useful to the sentence. In fact, you could take any swear word, any four-letter word, anything that we bleep out on anything, mm-hmm. and you could substitute it for Jolly Rancher and say it in a sentence, it wouldn't make a bit of difference to it. But you'd sound really stupid if you said Jolly Rancher.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, I imagine to God that's kind of how we sound when we just throw words around that don't add any meaning to it. Then when we get to His name in vain, all I can kind of think about there is the old Will Smith thing with Chris Rock. God saying, if you're going to act like that, get my name out your mouth. Before I slap it out of it. But if you're going to run around and say a bunch of things that don't make any sense, don't call my name in the middle of it. I mean, but if you take the approach of, I was thinking after we were texting the other night, we really shouldn't say any words in vain. Mm. If you take the definition of vain is just meaningless, no purpose behind it, you shouldn't say anything with no purpose behind it.
Right.
And if you take that, well, then you don't say as much, which is
and you don't have
maybe why I don't cuss as much.
You don't have as much to apologize for, or think about, should I have said that? And I think that might be a big piece of it. That I don't look at it as, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I never saw Jesus as being the most loquacious, talking all the time person. I think He chose His words wise, and when He chose them, He made you think on 3 different levels of, whoa, what exactly are you getting at there?